The sound of a suitcase zipper usually signals a vacation. But in my kitchen, at 6:15 on a Tuesday morning, it sounded exactly like a guillotine blade dropping. I stood in the center of our living room, a space with floor-to-ceiling glass walls that my husband, David, loved because they projected transparency. He called it our modern masterpiece. I called it the aquarium. Nowhere to hide. David wasn't looking at me. He was folding his silk ties with the frantic, lethal precision of a surgeon closing a wound he didn't care about. He didn't offer an apology. He didn't even offer an excuse. He just offered a status report. He said, "I'm leaving, Susan. Jessica and I are taking the early flight. The joint accounts have been liquidated. Don't bother checking the balances. You won't like the math." He looked at me then, not with guilt, but with the cold indifference of a CEO firing a redundant employee. He said, "I'm done carrying dead weight." The air left my lungs. My knees hit the hardwood floor with a thud that echoed through the silence. My world, my security, my 20-year investment in this man, all of it evaporated in 30 seconds. I expected my 13-year-old daughter to scream. I expected Madison to run to his leg and beg him to stay. Instead, I heard a crunch. I looked up. Madison was sitting at the kitchen island, wearing her oversized pajamas. She took a bite of her burnt toast, chewed slowly, and watched her father walk out the door. She didn't cry. She didn't blink. She just wiped a crumb from her lip and smirked. Before we see exactly how a 13-year-old destroyed a corporate shark without leaving her kitchen table, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from right now. I want to see which part of the world appreciates real justice the most. The front door clicked shut, and the silence that followed felt heavy enough to crack the floorboards. The only thing David left behind was the smell of his cologne, an expensive mix of cedar and arrogance that used to make me feel safe, but now just made me want to vomit. I didn't run after him. My legs refused to cooperate. I sat there on the floor, surrounded by the invisible wreckage of my life, and I did the only thing I could think of. I reached for my phone. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped it twice before I could unlock the screen. I tapped the banking icon. The little loading wheel spun for an eternity, mocking me. When the numbers finally appeared, the oxygen vanished from the room. $297.50. That was the sum total of 20 years of marriage. $297. I frantically swiped to the savings account. 0. The investment portfolio followed suit. 0. Then, with a rising scream stuck in my throat, I clicked on the account named Madison's Future. We had been feeding that account for 13 years. Every birthday check, every bonus, every tax refund. It should have held $90,000. It held nothing. The screen blurred. My chest tightened like a vice was crushing my ribs. I couldn't breathe. I was drowning on dry land. I was 42 years old, unemployed, and destitute, with a child to feed and a mortgage on a glass house I couldn't afford. The voice didn't sound scared. It didn't sound like a child who had just lost her father. It sounded like a technician diagnosing a faulty circuit. I looked up. Madison was standing over me. She didn't offer a hug or a tissue. She reached down and placed her hand firmly on my trembling wrist, grounding me. "Stop shaking," she said. I handled it. Handled it? I choked out the words. "Maddie, he took everything. We have nothing. We have information," she said. "And in the 21st century, that's worth more than cash." She walked back to the kitchen island and spun her laptop around so I could see the screen. I expected to see a video game, or maybe a chat room where she was venting to friends. Instead, I saw a dashboard that looked like something out of a spy movie. It was a black screen filled with scrolling text, map coordinates, and real-time activity logs. "What is this?" I whispered. "This is Dad," she said simply. "Or at least, this is his digital footprint." She tapped a key, and a list of passwords appeared on the screen. "Dad thinks he's a genius because he buys burner phones," Madison explained, her voice devoid of emotion. "But he's lazy. People are always lazy, Mom. They think if they hide the device, they hide the activity. But they forget about the keys." She pointed to a string of characters. Titanium 80. That's the password for the Netflix account he shares with me, she said. It's also the password for his secret email, his offshore banking app, and the encrypted chat he uses with Jessica. It's called a password reuse cascade. Once I had one key, I just walked through every door he thought he locked. She looked at me, her eyes dark and serious. I didn't hack him, Mom. I didn't have to. He left the front door open, and I've been sitting inside his house for 6 weeks, watching him pack. I stared at my daughter. The little girl who liked strawberry jam on her toast was gone. In her place sat a cold, calculating operator who had watched her father destroy our family and had simply taken notes. 6 weeks? I asked. You knew he was leaving for 6 weeks? I knew he was planning to, she corrected. But plans change, especially when someone intervenes. She turned the laptop back toward herself and started typing. The rhythmic clicking of the keys was the only sound in the room. Wipe your face, Mom, she said without looking up. We have work to do. I pulled myself up from the floor, my movements stiff and robotic. I walked to the sink and splashed cold water on my face, staring at the woman in the reflection. She looked terrified. She looked like a victim. For 20 years, that's exactly what I had been trained to be. Not a victim of violence, but of competence. David had been the architect of our lives, the one who understood the finances, the investments, the long-term strategies. I was the artist, the creative spirit, the one who was bad with numbers. You stick to the paintings, Susan, he used to say, patting my hand condescendingly across this very island. Leave the boring stuff to me. You get overwhelmed so easily. And I believed him. I gave up my gallery contracts because he said the stress wasn't good for me. I let him manage every dime because I convinced myself I couldn't understand a spreadsheet. I had made myself small so he could feel big. But now, looking at Madison, I realized the cost of my smallness. She wasn't looking at me. Her face was illuminated by the blue glow of the screen, her eyes darting back and forth across lines of data I couldn't comprehend. She looked exhausted. There were deep purple shadows under her eyes that I had dismissed as teenage sleep deprivation. Maddie, I said softly, why didn't you tell me? Her typing stopped for a fraction of a second, though she didn't turn around. Because you would have cried, she said. You would have confronted him. You would have asked him why, and then he would have known we were watching. He would have changed his passwords. He would have hidden the money better. She swiveled in her chair to face me then, and the look in her eyes broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. It wasn't the look of a child. It was the look of a weary soldier protecting a civilian. You can't catch a predator if you make noise. Mom, she said, you have to be quiet. You have to let them think they're winning, right up until the moment you close the trap. A sickening realization washed over me. This is what psychologists call the parentified child. While I had been living in the blissful ignorance of my art studio, painting flowers and trusting my husband, my 13-year-old daughter had been absorbing the anxiety I should have been carrying. She had traded her childhood for vigilance. She had traded her innocence for strategy. She hadn't just learned to code. She had learned that the only person she could rely on was herself. I'm so sorry, I whispered, tears finally spilling over. I should have protected you. You shouldn't have to deal with this. You're a child. Madison shrugged, a small, stiff movement that looked painful. I'm not a child anymore, Mom. Dad made sure of that when he started stealing from my college fund to buy jewelry for his mistress. Her attention snapped back to the screen, fingers flying across the keys again. Besides, she said, her voice dropping to a low, flat tone that chilled my blood. Being a child is a disadvantage. Nobody suspects the kid. Dad thinks I'm sitting here crying over my cereal. He thinks I'm collateral damage. She hit the enter key with a sharp snap. He forgot that I'm the one who set up his iPad. He forgot that I'm the one who taught him how to use the cloud. He thinks I'm irrelevant. A glance thrown over her shoulder caught me, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the little girl she used to be, but it was hardened, encased in armor. He's going to learn that I'm the most dangerous person in his life. she said. Now, come here. I need to show you where the money really went. I walked over to her side. Not as her mother, but as her student. The dynamic had shifted. The hierarchy of our home had collapsed the moment David walked out the door. I wasn't the parent anymore. I was the assistant, and my daughter was the architect of our survival. 24 hours. That's how long the silence lasted. We spent it in a strange, suspended state of animation. Madison barely slept, napping in 20-minute bursts with her head on the kitchen table, waking up to check her scripts and logs. I paced. I brewed coffee I didn't drink. I watched the phone like it was a bomb waiting to detonate. At 10:42 in the morning, it finally rang. The screen lit up with his name, David. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at Madison. She was already awake, her hands hovering over her keyboard. She nodded once. Answer it. I swiped the green button and put it on speaker. David? My voice trembled, despite my best efforts to keep it steady. Susan. His voice was loud, clear, and dripping with manic energy. I could hear the background hum of a busy space announcements, clinking glasses, low chatter. I'm calling from the lounge. We board in 45 minutes, so I'll make this quick. He sounded triumphant. He sounded free. Why are you calling, David? You already said everything yesterday. I forgot one detail, he said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. A little parting gift to help you understand the reality of your situation. What did you do? You know the house? He asked casually. The glass masterpiece you love so much? It's not just a house anymore, Susan. It's collateral. I gripped the edge of the counter. What are you talking about? I took out a loan against the equity yesterday morning, he said. A private bridge loan. $250,000. It funded our tickets, our initial setup costs, and a very nice retainer for my new legal team. You can't do that, I said, my voice rising. My name is on the deed. You need my signature. Oh, I had your signature, he laughed. Or at least, a very convincing digital facsimile of it. You really should be more careful about where you leave your iPad unlocked. The room spun. Fraud. He was confessing to felony fraud on a recorded line, except he didn't know it was recorded. Or maybe he didn't care. David, that's illegal. That's prison time. Only if you can catch me, he said. And by the time the bank realizes the signature is fake, and by the time the IRS starts asking questions about the tax liability, I just shifted onto you. I'll be in a non-extradition jurisdiction. I'm doing you a favor, Susan. The legal mess will keep you so busy you won't have time to be depressed. In the background, a woman's voice laughed a bright, tinkling sound. David, stop teasing her. We need to finish the champagne. Jessica, the compliance officer, laughing about financial crimes. You're a monster, I whispered. I'm a realist, he snapped. You were dead weight, Susan. I cut the anchor. Sink or swim. It's up to you. The line went dead. I stood there, holding the silent phone, feeling the weight of the invisible debt crushing me. $250,000. He hadn't just left us with nothing. He had left us with a crater. I looked at Madison. I expected fear. I expected panic. Instead, she was typing. Fast. Furious. Her fingers were a blur. Did he say they're in the lounge? She asked, her voice tight. Waiting for the flight to Dubai? I nodded, mute with shock. Madison stopped typing. She looked up at me, and a slow, terrifying smile spread across her face. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was a smile of a predator who just watched the prey step into the snare. Good, she said softly, because there is no flight to Dubai. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He has tickets. He has a job offer. He showed me the email last week. Madison turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a sleek, professional website for a company called Apex Global Logistics. It featured stock photos of glass skyscrapers, serious-looking executives shaking hands, and a list of international offices. Apex Global Logistics, Madison read. headquartered in Dubai, specializing in high-risk asset management. That's them, I said. That's the company that hired him. Mom, Madison said gently. Look at the URL registration date. I leaned in. Created 28 days ago. I built this site in my bedroom, she said. My jaw dropped. I stared at the screen, then at my 13-year-old daughter. You built a fake company? It's called a honeypot, she explained, her voice clinical. I needed to get them out of their jobs. I needed them to liquidate their assets voluntarily. If I just exposed them, Dad would have fought for the house. He would have dragged out the divorce for years. He would have hidden the money. A new window popped up as she clicked a folder labeled Correspondence. I created a fake headhunter persona named Marcus Thorne. I reached out to Dad on LinkedIn a month ago. I offered him everything his ego wanted. A VP title, a $150,000 signing bonus, and a relocation package to a tax haven. She scrolled through the emails. I saw David's replies, fawning, eager, arrogant. He bit immediately, Madison said. He was so desperate to feel important that he didn't even do a basic background check. He quit his job. Jessica quit hers. They cashed out their 401ks to pay for the upfront relocation fees I invented. She clicked another tab. A flight itinerary appeared. I sent them these tickets this morning, she said. They look real. The confirmation numbers look real. But they're not in the airline's system. They're sitting in the first-class lounge, waiting for a flight that doesn't exist, for a job that doesn't exist, to go to a country where nobody is waiting for them. The magnitude of what she had done washed over me. She hadn't just hacked him. She had socially engineered his entire destruction. She had used his own greed and narcissism to lure him onto a ledge, and then she had convinced him to jump. They're unemployed, I whispered. They're homeless. They have no insurance, no income, and no way back, Madison added. Because the second they realized the tickets were fake, I deleted the website. Marcus Thorne's email is gone. The phone number they've been texting is disconnected. She leaned back in her chair, watching the cursor blink on the black screen. Right now, they're drinking champagne. Celebrating their escape, she said. In about 20 minutes, the gate agent is going to tell them their boarding passes are invalid, and that's when the real panic starts. She looked at me, her dark eyes devoid of pity. He wanted a fresh start, Mom. I gave him a clean slate. I wiped everything away. The phone rang again. It wasn't the calm, arrogant ring of before. It was a jarring, insistent sound. Madison looked at the caller ID. David. Showtime, she said. I answered the phone. Susan, there's a glitch! David was screaming, the sophisticated veneer of the corporate fixer completely stripped away. He sounded like a frightened animal. The gate agent says the tickets are invalid. I can't pull up the Marcus Thorne email. The website is gone. It's a 404 error. I need you to Google the main office number for Apex Global. My data isn't loading properly. He was still doing it. Even while he was abandoning me, he was barking orders, expecting me to be his secretary. Madison didn't look up from her screen. Her fingers were moving with a fluid, terrifying rhythm. I tapped the button. David, I said. There is no number. There is no Apex Global. What? Of course there is. I signed a contract. I have the PDF. You signed a graphic design project, Madison said loud enough for the microphone to pick up. I made the logo in Photoshop. There was a silence on the other end so profound it felt like the line had gone dead. Then, a ragged intake of breath. Madison? Hi, Dad, she said, her voice flat. Enjoying the lounge? I hear the shrimp cocktail is overpriced. You did this? His voice cracked. You little. Do you have any idea what you've done? We quit our jobs. We liquidated everything. We have $200,000 in cash in a briefcase and nowhere to go. Actually, Madison said, tapping a key with a flourish. You might want to check your phone. I just pushed a little update to your location settings. What are you doing? Panic was rising in his voice again. I just pinged your GPS coordinates to the legal department at Jessica's firm. Madison said casually. And to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. What? This time, it was Jessica's voice, shrill and terrified in the background. Why would you do that? Because of the embezzlement, Jessica, Madison said. I found your hidden ledger. The consulting fees you were skimming from client accounts? The $300,000 you stole to fund your new life? I have the logs. I have the IP addresses. I have everything. That's a lie, Jessica screamed. It's in your sent folder, Madison replied. Or it was, until I forwarded it to your compliance officer 5 seconds ago. I watched my daughter. She wasn't angry. She wasn't vindictive. She was simply executing a program. She had dismantled 2 adult lives without leaving her chair. Susan! David was begging now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by pure, distilled desperation. Susan, please. You have to stop her. If the police come, if they find the cash. I'm your husband. I'm the father of your child. You were, I said. We can fix this. He pleaded. I'll come home. We'll put the money back. We'll say it was a misunderstanding. Just tell her to stop. Madison stopped typing. The room went silent. She picked up her tablet and slid it across the quartz countertop toward me. On the screen was an email draft. The subject line read, Evidence regarding fraudulent loan application and identity theft. David Miller. Attached were the logs of the digital forgery he had admitted to on the phone, the fake loan documents, and a recording of his confession from 5 minutes ago. The recipient was the fraud division at our bank. One button. Send. The tablet screen glowed against the quartz. My eyes drifted to the empty space on the wall where our family portrait used to hang, then to the $297 in my account. Finally, I looked at my daughter, who had spent 6 weeks in the dark carrying the weight of the world because her father decided she was collateral damage. Susan? David whispered. Please. He wanted mercy. He wanted the wife who smoothed things over, the wife who absorbed the pain so he didn't have to feel consequences. My fingers closed around the cool metal of the tablet. There was no tremor. You wanted a fresh start, David? I asked softly. Yes. Yes. Please. Across the island. Madison gave me a small, imperceptible nod. This was it. This was the moment I stopped being the victim and became the executioner. I just gave you one, I said. You're starting from 0. I pressed send. Goodbye, David. I hung up the phone just as the sound of sirens began to wail in the background of the call. 6 months have passed since I pressed that button. In the movies, this is the part where the villain learns his lesson and the heroes go back to their normal lives. But real life doesn't work that way. There is no going back. There is only moving forward into the wreckage to build something new. David and Jessica are currently awaiting trial on federal charges including wire fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement. The clean slate Madison gave them turned out to be a cage. They are unbankable. Their credit scores are non-existent. They are, for all intents and purposes, digital ghosts. David calls sometimes, usually collect from a detention center payphone. I've never accepted the charges. I don't need to hear his apologies. I have his bank records, and those told me everything I ever needed to know about who he really is. We sold the glass aquarium. I couldn't sleep in a house that felt like a display case anymore. We moved to a small bungalow on the other side of town. It has creaky floorboards, a leaky faucet, and the most beautiful north-facing light I've ever seen. For the first time in 15 years, I picked up a paintbrush. I'm not painting pretty flowers anymore. I'm painting storms. And for the first time in my life, I'm selling them. But the biggest change isn't the house, or the art, or the absence of David's suffocating cologne. It's Madison. She didn't go back to being a normal 13-year-old. She didn't join the soccer team or start going to mall hangouts. You can't unsee the code once you've looked behind the curtain. Instead, she founded a company. It's called the Ghost Protocol. She sits at our new, scratched-up kitchen table every evening after homework, but she's not playing games. She's on encrypted video calls with women who look exactly like I did 6 months ago, scared, confused, and staring at empty bank accounts. She helps them trace hidden assets. She teaches them how to lock down their credit, how to spot digital forgery, and how to secure their futures before their husbands can steal them. She charges $125 an hour. She's fully booked for the next 3 months. Last night, I watched her working. The blue light of the screen illuminated her face, but the shadows under her eyes were gone. She wasn't manic or anxious. She was focused. She looked like a captain steering a ship through a storm. She caught me watching her and pulled her headphones down. "You okay, Mom?" she asked. "I'm fine, baby," I said, placing a cup of tea next to her laptop. "I was just thinking, are you happy?" She considered the question with that terrifying, brilliant maturity of hers. "I don't know if I'm happy in the way other kids are," she said. "But I feel safe. And I'm making sure other people are safe too." "You saved us, Madison," I told her. "No," she shook her head, turning back to her code. "I just turned on the lights. You were the one who walked us out the door." She's wrong, of course. She was the warrior. I was just the witness who finally woke up. David tried to bury us. He thought we were dirt. He forgot that we were seeds. And now, we've grown into a forest he can never cut down. If you think Madison was right to press that button, hit the like button. And if you want more stories about the underdogs biting back, make sure you're subscribed.